Hey, welcome to week 252. It is not Groundhog Day. It feels like it because we're talking about tariffs still, even though we were talking about it at the 250th week anniversary. Then we talked about it last week. And now we've got Chris from Shumaker Advisors inside the Beltway, inside baseball knowledge. Hopefully, we'll find out. So, welcome, Chris. We're going to be happy to have you on here. Lots of interest going on. I just came back from Cleveland last night and saw the fox on the loose, like literal fox that's it was like a block from our house because our neighbors said, hey, there's a bobcat that we've seen at 5 a.m. and there's a fox. I got to see the fox last night about 9 o'clock when I came home. But while I was in Cleveland for this board meeting, this company makes wiring harnesses for hydraulic actuators in mining equipment. So very specialized, high, explosive environments. Plus they do sensors and other things. Company's called Paquin. And they were talking about like, hey, tariffs and what's going on, what's happening with some of their suppliers, and they supply some of the biggest, like names out there in the mining equipment world and other places. But they have, it's interesting because they have parts and materials coming in from various places that are being hit by these tariffs. So this is still a very hot topic. So if anybody has questions along the way, I'll be monitoring those things. You can harass us in the chat, but go easy on Chris. We want him to come back. So we're thrilled to have you, Chris. Thank you so much. And in the meantime, Adam, Jack, anything that you have on current events? So by the way, yes, this was April the 15th week. There are a lot of, kind of big things that happened April the 15th. So you have April the 15th tax deadline that actually got extended if you're in North Carolina and South Carolina. Just so you know, we were working hard to get stuff going, but that is May 1st. Secondly, on the 16th, Adam or Jack, do you know it was a big milestone on the 16th? Do you guys know what that was?
Can you give us a
No?
hint?
It's tied to UNC Chapel Hill. It's tied to the football program.
Oh gosh, I should know
The,
this, right? Wait,
somebody should be able to answer this one, and if so, Shoemaker is going to give him a gift card for Starbucks. I'm just
I
saying.
will embarrassingly because I should know that.
They lost again.
No.
No, Jim. No, the QB's got, well, maybe that could be true, Joseph, but no, way, way, way bigger than that. And I found this out because this guy's granddaughter, girlfriend, was congratulating him for his 73rd birthday. And his 24-year-old girlfriend was talking about how Bill Belichick had turned 73. So yesterday was Bill Belichick's 73rd birthday. So
Okay.
there you go. And no, did anybody get it? I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, nobody got it. So
Because we're trying to put that out of our minds, Gary.
Yeah.
Gary,
More so
she-
because of the girlfriend's age,
Yeah.
not his.
Yeah,
That's
what I
fine.
haven't seen is selfies with my daughter hanging out with her yet. But
is she an
evidently,
assistant coach? Has she been given a title on the football program yet? Is like, or she's sort of like Elon Musk with Doge.
Yeah.
There was no real
Yeah.
appointment, but
Chris, I got to tell you, there's so many bad ways that I could take that conversation in terms of title that we'll just. Hey, this is a family program.
I've seen the video of her out there, during practice, the spring practice. It's like, so.
Yeah. So I just thought I had to throw that one in the punch bowl just for some levity because we're talking about some kind of serious stuff here. So anyway, but yeah, so those were a couple of things, but seriously, April 15, we were hard charging and we're still hard charging because it's actually May 1st. So Anybody in North and South Carolina, you can breathe a little bit of sigh of relief because your quarterly payments aren't due until May 1st. Thanks to, and not really thanks to, but it was due to the hurricane relief issues. So anything from Adam or Jack before we unleash the hounds?
Yeah. No, I mean, the only thing I'll hit on is that, yeah, probably where Chris was going to go, is that, kind of the theory, well, just besides the theory of why tariffs would or would not be a good idea, but the practical application is that, I raise a tariff from a country, and if I'm the importer of that good, I get a bill for what I imported. And the bill comes due when I have to when it shows up, So like that means that if I bought something and then a tariff was imposed, they don't say, oh, well, you entered into a contract for that, prior to this tariff. No, it's like, when that shows up on the dock, regardless of purchase date, I'm getting hit with a bill with a tariff. So in practical application, there actually is no scenario where the country of origin pays the tariff, literally, that I'm aware of. Maybe Chris will tell us something different, but there's no scenario where the country of origin pays the tariff. The only way that the country of origin pays the tariff indirectly is if I, as the purchaser, went back to the country of origin or the manufacturer of origin or the person that I purchased the product from and said, hey, sorry, dude, y'all are going to need to take a price cut. And in which case I'm still paying the tariff. It's just that I got an original reduced purchase price associated with it. So my point in saying all that is that a lot of our clients, like in other words, like this could all sort of sound good on paper, but the practical application is our clients are now receiving bills for tariffs. In some ways, unexpected ways, because, they sort of thought, well, I bought it before the tariff, it doesn't matter, and, if there's a pause on it, it's like, well, I got the bill for the tariff, but then there's a pause and there's not a pause. How do I get the money back? So it is, I know it's a family program, but it's a shit show that is not good. So my only point in bringing that up is that, it just, I think a lot of our clients that were sort of pro go after it, stick it to the man, which I am too. Like, I'm not super happy that China steals our intellectual property and, everything else, and, props up, does nefarious things with its currency, to manipulate it. That's all not good. And at the same time, I think a lot of people didn't really expect, oh shit, I'm going to get a bill for that. How am I going to pay for that? Well, there's only one way to pay for that. I got to pass it on to somebody else, or I got to take in the shorts. So it is just creating quite a mess. Soapbox done, mic drop done, tirade complete. Get us out of that hole, Chris and Jack. You're on mute, Chris.
Chris is on mute, but before you go, Chris, I just want to say that, first of all, thank you for joining us and answer the question. I will defer my time on the floor to Chris because I want to hear more from him than from myself. But I will say that what's interesting about Shumaker Advisors, and Chris will tell you more about that, is that there are people, Chris's colleagues, that are on the other side. And so when I've had the opportunity to have a person on each side, throw a powder keg into the conversation and then see what happens. And it's interesting because it's very cordial and people, presenting their positions, but it's always an understanding of the other side's position in whatever they do, and which is really cool because, I mean, you can have some pretty drawn out, drag out discussions and maintaining your position without appreciating the other side. So I do appreciate Chris and my other colleagues at Shumaker Advisors. So Chris, if you want to do the quick elevator pitch introduction, and then proceed from there, and then answer Adam's question.
I figured out how to take myself off mute here. So thank you. And thank you again, guys. First time on, so I appreciate it. I'm flattered. And hello to the audience out there. Chris Salemme, Shumaker Advisors, Washington, D.C. office, coming to you here from my home in Arlington, Virginia. I've been with Shumaker. I will be with Shumaker 2 years in June. I represent the Democratic side of the aisle. For Shumaker, cut my teeth on the campaign side early on as a young buck, working presidential campaign starting back in 2004 for Kerry Edwards and moving up. Also have some experience running government affairs shops for a tech and telecom company, as well as working in the at a trade association for over a decade in the GR shops as well. So I've been navigating the hallways of Congress in the House and Senate for over 15 plus years, nearly 20 now, as well as working, with the executive branch when Dems were in power, with the Biden folks in certain agencies. Again, I hopefully, a lot of my focus has been on tech and telecom, but that being said, tariffs cover a broad swath of things, but, happy to lend my voice here for this discussion. So again, thank you. And also I wanted to say, Jack, my wife would probably thank you, since you guys might not recognize it in some of the audience. Congress is on a 2-week Easter and Passover recess. So it's really quiet in DC right now, at least up on Capitol Hill, which means this has been great for me. I've been able to get out of my hoodie and sweatpants. It only took a few days, but I actually put on a collared shirt and shaved a little bit for you. So thank you for that. And I know my wife will thank you. But listen, despite the fact that Congress is on recess and it is extremely quiet up here, you wouldn't think that, right? You really wouldn't think that, given everything that's transpired and taking place since Monday or the last, 3 weeks, 3 months. It's pretty chaotic, and it is still pretty chaotic. Most of that, though, is coming from the executive branch with these tariffs. Look, Adam, you were talking about potential sticker shock from some of these companies, and I think the best description to talk about what everyone's feeling potentially, or what not just Main Street, but Wall Street's feeling, is Jerome Powell's comments yesterday, right? Jerome Powell really shook the markets yesterday when he spoke at the Economic Club of Chicago, when asked about, this trade war as it's entering basically its 3rd week. Jerome Powell did really not, those marks really did not help the markets. Basically saying that, he's not moving anywhere on the financial markets, but they're doing what they are supposed to. But obviously, he says they're going to have to build in for some inflation moving forward, that the trade war, he didn't directly criticize the White House, but consumers should anticipate rising prices coming in the near future here. So, I think Jerome Powell also did mention the fact that he didn't think these, the tariffs were going to go as high as they have. So I think there's a lot of people still absorbing all of this. You couple that with what's going on here in DC. They just passed a large budget reconciliation bill. Okay, we're talking major tax cuts. That's a lot of focus here for members of Congress right now, and while they're back home doing their town halls and engaging with folks. But I think for the markets and Main Street right now, people are starting to try to build in for these tariffs. You saw the numbers this morning, as early as this morning, come out about consumers spending. It's actually up. But why is it up? From what we were reading, and you might have heard, it's because folks in kind of the higher economic categories of this country are spending money now, knowing that they need to get their car now, building in for what these potential tariffs are going to look like. So it is going to be playing itself out throughout summer and going forward. How does that mix into DC? Happy to dive into it throughout these conversations and more answers. But I think the noteworthy piece for you, Adam, and the answer right now is that I'm looking at what happened with Jerome Powell's comments yesterday, and then President Donald Trump's remarks today on a post saying that we can't get rid of Jerome Powell fast enough. So watch that dynamic play out here, right? It's he's not bringing Jerome Powell back, right? President Donald Trump has said he wants interest rates lowered here. I don't think Jerome Powell is going to do that. He doesn't seem like he's making that move anytime soon. He's going to hold pat, it seems like. So watch that dynamic here, that political play fallout moving forward here. Right now, Donald Trump has enjoyed basically little pushback on these tariffs. There have been members on the Republican side of the aisle. I'll give you an example. Senator Ted Cruz, who's said that, you know, tariffs don't lead to anything but, I'm paraphrasing here, you know, inflation and higher costs for consumers. So, but will it go any further? I don't know. In pushback. So, but, you know, we'll see what happens here. But I think right now, what was playing out in the last 24 hours is just this Jerome Powell, Fed chair's comments, and then Donald Trump's response to that, and see how that's going to be playing out in the coming months.
So, Chris, couple comments and a question. So a comment came in probably from somebody on the other side of the aisle, but he said, you forgot inflation is down to pre-2020 levels, goes down further with a drop in oil prices once the new oil hits the market. So comment. You're going to have both sides of the aisle and perspectives on this, but the one thing that is in common is we are privately held business owners, and so we're all very concerned about all of that. So this next question comes from Grant as an importer. He says, one of the biggest immediate issues is cash flow. Duties must be paid at point of entry. Is the administration aware of this as an issue, especially for self-funded small and medium-sized businesses?
So let me answer this last one. I am, again, representing the Democratic side of the aisle, don't have the I'm not having those conversations with the administration. I can't build in and give you, you know, clear-cut answers on some of this as it relates to tariffs. I've seen a couple of comments come in, so I apologize up front. Again, I'm not in the room. Democrats obviously are not in the room. They are in the minority in House and Senate. Everyone is out at these agencies, so I'm not explicitly a part of these conversations. You know, I think we could bring in my colleagues in a future call who might be able to have you give better answers on some of this. But that being said, look, I think you don't need to look at the markets to recognize that there's a lot of volatility, and uncertainty brings that. So we're being told short-term pain for long-term gain. Okay, but I have an email yesterday I received last night from a local company here in Washington, D.C. Okay, they have a storefront. They also sell to other. It's an accessories company. They were building in for tariffs. Okay, for July, they just bumped that up to April. Okay, so some of their supplies are coming in from China. So folks are now building in. I saw a comment about eggs. I thought eggs were up. You know, here we are, eggs are back up. And I understand inflation is down from 2020 levels. But again, Jay Powell is already building in for potential inflation. So we'll see how this plays out. I get it, but Americans seem pretty jittery, and Americans are starting to prepare as the buying is already kind of ramping up, especially in the automotive space, as we've noted, going down the line, knowing that this stuff is all going to go up.
So, Chris, if I could ask, what would you say are maybe the top 5 myths out there that people are believing that are just not, regardless of, again, what position, what side you're on, that are just not factually true or not a likely outcome of any of this? Is that a fair question, or is that, you know, there's just no way to answer that? And you double mute, you're on mute.
I would imagine this audience, you know, they have their favorite shows, their favorite podcasters, their folks that they're listening to.
Right.
And they're probably well educated on what's going on in day-to-day business here, whether it's the markets or even Capitol Hill, if you're a casual listener to what's taking place up here. But you should listen to the feds. You should listen to the Fed. And the administration, I'm sorry, is going to have their spin on this. They are, right? They are going to have their spin on it. And that's fair, right? You have the bully pulpit. You have to push this agenda, and you have to push your messaging. I don't believe that the administration has done a very good job on their messaging of this. Okay. There is just, their stop and start. I don't, my question would be, what happened with Canada and Mexico? This was a war on fentanyl, but now all of a sudden there are exemptions for Canada and Mexico. So does that mean that was what these this folks in the administration were talking about? The tariffs were initially placed on Canada and Mexico because of the war on fentanyl and to cut fentanyl coming over from the borders. But now all of a sudden they've been removed, or there's exemptions for these two countries in certain extents. So did we win the war on drugs with these companies, with these countries? So I think the messaging coming out of the administration has been muddled. So you should listen to what's coming out, but you should focus on what you're hearing from the feds and reliable news sources, which is a broad definition now, but there's I can think of some, but some might not even agree where I would go with that.
Well, I've said in the past that a good way to get kind of both sides of it is to hit 114 on Sirius XM, which is Fox News, and then go to 117, which is MSNBC, and you'll hear the same story, but you wouldn't know it, kind of thing. And then you get to hear both sides of it. So, or at least the spin on both sides, and you can make up your own mind how you feel about certain things. So
here's an interesting thing. So one of the conversations, actually I was given an article by some of these guys that I was with for this board meeting, and again, they're supplying, given the rare earth materials issue from China, they're speculating that, and with the reduction of all the regulations that were imposed previously that are now being lifted, mining is going to boom again in the US. A lot of mining has been going on other places, and China's still building coal-fired power plants like there's no tomorrow. But this was an interesting take, whether you believe it or not, I don't know. But it's an interesting take. And so I'm going to just read this. It says, what you're not hearing is the Chinese can't replace the US market. Without it, the Chinese economy collapses. And I've read this similar thing in 3 places now. Mr. Wonderful, who's probably far more conservative too. I think he's kind of a libertarian, quite frankly, but he has the same take. But he says, here's why. China's entire economic miracle was built on one thing, being America's cheap labor manufacturing hub. The Chinese miracle playbook was simple: open markets to the West, offer dirt cheap labor, ignore safety standards, let Western companies rake in profits. It worked for decades, but they forgot something that's crucial. Others can do it too. Massive miscalculation. Beijing thought American leaders they made rich would protect them forever. They believe these corporate puppet masters. So this guy's like, yeah, he's got one side. Wrong. Along came Trump, who owes them nothing. The numbers don't lie. U.S. exports to China, 143 billion. Chinese imports to the U.S., 438 billion. Flooding our markets while restricting their markets. And Trump said no more. So it's interesting. He said reports are flooding in, factories shutting down, Amazon canceling orders, stores closing, warehouses overflowing. Who knows? The house of cards is falling, but we're not hearing this, but a lot of the Chinese propaganda. Who knows? Again, to Jack's point, you can go to Fox News and get one side. You go to MSNBC, get the complete other side. But here's the point: will it affect U.S. consumers? Yes, briefly. You might struggle to find cheap plastic junk for a few months. so we'll see. And he says, so this is that was Rod Martin, who is the CEO of Martin Capital. And I checked him out on LinkedIn. I think he's down in Florida. Um, Interesting perspective. At the end of the day, whatever, like, what do we do as business owners? Because I've got a son who has a shoe company. He moved all his factory from China a few months ago, which, like, they just wanted to get out of China anyway for a number of reasons. They were manufacturing in South Korea one line, and then another line they were manufacturing in China. So they're in Vietnam. Oh, well, and now, China's trying to do some end arounds through Vietnam, and they have been doing that. Like, we've known that. But they're stuck, like, and they're completely online. And I said, "Well, Zach, how's that working?" And he said, "The reality is like if the administration cuts a deal with Vietnam," and he said, "the truth is there wasn't a tariff going back and forth between Vietnam and the U.S. I don't know if I don't know, but he said we're buying materials, some raw materials and fabrics from China because he said basically when they came in and outsourced, they shut everything down. Like a lot of the technology that the US had. Now he gets socks that are made up in North Carolina. Yay, North Carolina. And we had textiles, but anybody living in North Carolina knows that the textile, world was decimated and a lot of stuff got shipped to China. Well, they've got the technology and they have the workforce and they have very cheap labor. So that's part of the conundrum. Like, hey, how do you pick and piece, that part out of the shoe? So I think it's just very interesting. So we've got another couple. This is good. We got some interesting comments coming in here. So I'm going to read the first one. Let's see. I'm going to go to Robert and then we'll come back to Joseph. So Robert says, given the tariffs have been part of trade discussions and supported by both parties for over 40 years, and considering the long-standing issues of unfair non-monetary trade practices, IP theft, and currency manipulation, shouldn't we expect some short-term pain as we work to recalibrate in onshore industries and see tariff as a necessary motivator to bring countries back to the negotiating table. Come on, let's move my cursor. There we go. To recalibrate. Necessary motivator to bring countries to the negotiating table to address these deeper issues. I think that's a good point, Robert. What do you like, Chris? I'd love your perspective on that.
Actually, can I hit that one?
I think I agree with all of that. It's a great point. I mean, look, intellectual property theft has been rampant by China for years. There are restrictions on American companies who want to go over to China. And China does not have to deal with that if, bringing a company over here, right? So I don't think you would find a lot of people to say that there's been imbalances, there's been unfair practices by China. I agree. And also there have been times Joe Biden slapped tariffs on China. Okay, so there's tariffs, can be a tool when used, correctly and strategically, as in a positive outcome here potentially. And Donald Trump has done this before. We should expect it. We were expecting it. It was part of his campaign. I get it, and I agree with the commenter earlier. So you just read. So but the issue it stands is what are this back and forth, it's stop and start, has been a real problem for the markets and companies to try to build in redundancy. And now there's exemptions. Big win for Apple and tech with some of that. So supposedly it was 2 weeks ago that we were going to see, manufacturing of potential phones here in the United States. That's not the case anymore. It's going to stay in China. Okay. But where are we going? There is again, they are not clearly, they as in the White House, in my opinion, are not clearly articulating what is going to be, what the game plan is here in this trade war. And quite frankly, I think at the end of the day, they never really, it's kind of shoot from the hip, it seems like. And that, I think, is what is throwing everybody for a loop, whether it's Main Street or Wall Street.
Do you
Adam,
think, I'm sorry, Adam, go ahead.
you're muted, or we can't hear you.
Nope. All right, I'm gonna go while you're trying to figure that out. All right. So, Chris, would you say that, and again, you said before that you're not in the White House and you're not, you don't know directly, but there are people who have said, well, this was, not shoot from the hip, but the plan, generally speaking, was throw as many punches as you can, see where you can reallocate or rebalance the back and forth and with other countries, and then but use China as being kind of the stalking horse, so that you get a rebalance on the trade back and forth with other countries that are the ones that we hear that are calling up the White House and saying, okay, hey, we're willing to discuss this and that. Do you think that was maybe part of the strategy? Because it just seems like, again, punches were thrown, kind of see who reacts, how they react, knowing that China's not going to be as anxious to call up the White House. So what do you think?
So some of these trade deals in the past that from previous administrations have taken years. We have a 90-day pause. So in the list of countries that were placed on that had tariffs slapped on them, went much further than most people anticipated, right? I think that we had heard that, I had heard that, I'd seen that. I think it was a surprise to many Republicans up here as well, walking the halls of Congress. So it is a long list of negotiations that will be taking place. So I mean, into Jerome Powell's own comments, it went even further than he had anticipated. So again, we have a 90-day pause. They're going to check off some of this potential low-hanging fruit with some of these countries in 90 days after it's taken many months in some cases, and in some instances with other countries, and then have China with who we're dealing with. China. I mean, it's a lot of work. I don't envy anybody at Treasury or anybody else having to deal with this. It's a lot of work. It's coming at them fast. I get that the administration moves very quickly here, and that was the goal. As soon as Trump won, it was to get everybody out there. Look, it's again, still feels like it's the shoot from the hip piece, and with no real answers as to how they're going to, how are they bringing China to the table right now? All I see is back and forth reciprocal tariffs.
What are the Republican side saying about that when they say, so they get the comment, yeah, you guys are just firing bullets randomly and kind of seeing what happens. So what is their response to that?
I think that's a great question for my counterparts. But
I know I'm not meaning to put you on the spot, but I mean,
no,
not that
you're not. Look, I think that it depends on who you talk to within the Republican Party. Some are going to say they're a little nervous about what's transpiring, but they're still going to support the president, and that's okay, and that's what you would expect going forward. So again, some members are saying that tariffs, they need to be careful with how this approach is going, but I think overall you're not going to see much pushback from these members.
So there's not anybody saying there's a super secret plan that only the people in the Oval Office know or anything like that, or are they saying that?
I haven't heard that. No.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think, let me just start, since we're talking about the intersection of the executive branch and Congress, obviously we're talking about a tax on imported goods, right? So this falls primarily under the authority of Congress, but over time, Congress has basically delegated tariff powers to the executive branch. So here we are today. You do hear about, I believe there was a Republican member of Congress who introduced a resolution and or was it a bill to trying to rein in executive branch powers on tariffs because he believes they were going too far. Democrats were a part of that. But again, the Constitution gives Congress the power to relegate commerce in foreign nations. So what you have now, though, is President Trump is using these authorities to aggressively go after the trade imbalance in countries that he sees are unfairly making money off of us. So which again was part of his campaign, and that's what he's doing, and he's moving forward on it, and that's fair. I don't anticipate right now. Congress does have the ability potentially to rein in sort of the executive branch on tariffs. They could potentially do that, but they could pass for legislation or repeal or revise any sort of laws, or there's obviously oversight or that could take place in Congress. But ultimately, I don't think you're going to see that. So it's going to take a lot. And again, it's not going to happen when they come back from this recess. So I think just as a starting point, Congress does have a play, but you're not really probably going to see much of that other than some members standing up and voicing their concerns about what's going on, which I also think points out there isn't much communication.
So, go ahead, Adam.
Well,
We've got a list of other stuff coming in. But go for it.
Hey, we're just gonna have to keep these up because, man, we got a fired up group. Everybody's fired up about the topic.
It's good.
I think that to address the short-term pain versus long-term gain commentary, I think that this. I don't mean this to be offensive. It will probably come across offensive to anybody. But I really don't mean it to be. It's like the problem with short-term pain versus long-term gain is that sounds good on paper until I have the pain.
Yeah.
In other words, like, sure, no, I'm all for short-term pain versus long-term gain. An easy way to solve this and ease the burden is we're going to issue a temporary 5% tax on every U.S. taxpayer so that we can build up a fund so that every small business has the ability to pay the tariff bill. Like that would be an easy solution that would be cash flow neutral for this whole thing until the long-term gain. Because again, the whole slap the tariff on versus, hey, we're telling you this is coming, so get to the table and negotiate if you don't do something about it. I mean, that really comes down to negotiating strategy. So, like, in other words, I can, whether I agree with the administration's negotiating strategy or not, it doesn't really matter, but basically either I do it immediately or I say it's coming and then have the ability to have the other party negotiate. It doesn't really matter, if it gets to the same result other than some periods of uncertainty. I do tend to align a lot with Chris in terms of, the whole world believed China was the problem, the whole Western world believed that China was the problem. So we probably should have just focused there rather than anywhere else. But, and there's broad bipartisan agreement for that. So it's like, hey, go for the win there, and that seems to be where we're sort of getting closer to rationalizing down to, because as Chris pointed out, there wasn't actually a tariff that South Korea was putting on us, right? And we did outsource our low-cost manufacturing to them. That was like a strategy at some point. So I feel like with that in mind, I think the comments around shouldn't we all be sacrificing some short-term pain for long-term gain, that's all well and good until somebody has to write the check for that. It's sort of like, in other words, I could say the same thing about the national debt. Hey, Gary, I'll tell you what, it's actually basic math. You're probably going to need to cut the government by about 10%. You're probably going to need to raise tax rates by about 4 or 5%. I'll be by to pick up your check tomorrow for your 5% tax increase. You know, you're going to agree with me philosophically till I come for the check, you know, and then you're going to say, that's a bunch of BS, you know, with that. So it's just, you know, that's, I know that didn't really get to a solution. It's just more like, hey, the reason that this is a hard topic is that some real people are having to write real checks, and real people are really worried right now about what's gonna happen. So it's just, you know,
well, I would just quickly say to that, Adam,
yeah,
you tell that to the retirees who are looking at their savings accounts, 401ks diminish. Okay. You know, they don't have the long term as much as I might. So it is a problem. Short term pain is a problem for many Americans who have their money in markets.
Right. Right. No, that I didn't even touch on that. You're exactly right, Chris. Like if I'm on a fixed income for my retirement account, you know, I mean, granted, you know, it's probably not very comforting for me to say, well, you just did have a historic bull run over the last, you know, 2 years. So you can absorb to take a few losses. Like nobody wants to hear that, you know, right now. And they don't want to hear about it when they're on the same fixed income and all of a sudden Social Security check doesn't go. Because a lot of people don't have a 401k plan. All they have is Social Security, which if inflation does go up as a result of, because again, with inflation coming down, that doesn't actually mean that prices came down. All that means is they stopped going up as fast.
Right.
So the inflation adjustment that happened for Social Security just said, hey, we caught up with where prices are at. Now they're starting to slow. So any cost of living adjustment that Social Security does, I think, is a year in arrears. So if you're on Social Security, like my mother is, that's her only source of income, you know, she feels pretty, like, in other words, a $500 swing in purchasing power is a big freaking deal on her in terms of having to make some pretty damn hard choices. Or, you know, somebody on here is going to say, be a better son and send your mom $500. Okay, I will. But it, versus giving her a lecture about life choices, I won't do that. Thankfully, my mom doesn't listen to this before. She doesn't. She sometimes listens to the webinar, but she never gets this deep. So, anyway, somebody's gonna say that dude's heartless.
You're not heartless, I know.
Yeah.
It's funny because my mom, who just turned 90 last month or 2 months ago, you know, she's like, oh, when I talk to her every week, sometimes multiple times a week, I'm like, hey, Mom, how you doing? She goes, oh, boy, you know, this world is just, I just hope I'm going to get my Social Security check. And like, it sounds like they're not going to give it. I said, Mom, what are you listening to? NPR. I said, turn it off. It doesn't, like, they are not going to cut your Social Security check. You know, that frustrates me, Chris, on the other side of the aisle. Oh, they're going to cut Social Security. Well, last I heard was 324 million people are currently on the Social Security rolls, and we have 324 million people in the country. There's something wrong. So I'm like, Mom, do yourself a favor, turn off the news. You can be way happier, but it's just hard when you're 90 years old and you're still in your house. That kind of crap needs to stop. Both sides of the table. Quit throwing out falsehoods as if they're truth. Let's treat each other with some dignity and respect. And so I really appreciate having you on here, Chris. I think which would be fun before I get to some of these comments. Jack, think about it. Chris, think about it. Wouldn't it be interesting if we had Chris and we had Chris's counterpart at the same time and we were talking about the same conversation? Woo! I would like that before the 4th of July. Chris, you game?
Listen, if you want to invite me back, I'm more than happy to come on here. I have those same conversations with the two of them in our office, you know, except it's not being recorded. And, you know, I don't know if I can curse on here, but,
well, Adam kind of does, and then he has to put money in the curse jar, but
I give you permission.
We have a spirited conversation. So yeah, I'm happy to do it.
I
I
think that'd be
hope
fun.
to elicit some thoughts from the audience in particular. That's why we do it. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to. I'm obviously not trying to piss anybody off, just
Yeah.
giving my thoughts. Can I say one thing though, Gary, to your point? I have an aunt
Absolutely.
who
Absolutely.
lives alone, widowed, Social Security dependent, asks me the
Yeah.
same thing. Am I not going to get my Social Security check? You are exactly right. I would point out though, and I tell her the same thing, Gary. She's going to get it. It's okay. Don't stress. She's
Yeah.
watching TV all day, right? Same
Yeah.
thing. But
Terrible.
I'll tell you what doesn't help is when you see Elon Musk, an unelected, running through or interviewing, talking about Social Security as a Ponzi scheme. That scares people, especially probably your mother and my aunt. So um, I get that, to your point about both sides doing
Yeah.
this and ramping it up, but there has been some language and comments that I think would scare Social Security recipients.
Yeah. 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 All right, so we've got a bunch of comments. This is so good, man. This has been some of the most spirited stuff since PPP. So, woo! So here we go. Hold on here. We've got a bunch from Robert and Joseph. But come on, man. Let's get my cursor to work. Here we go. Let's see. Man, we've got a bunch of stuff coming in here. All right. So Robert says, given that tariffs have been part of the discussions and supported by both parties over 40 years, and considering long-standing issues of unfair non-monetary trade practices, IP theft, shouldn't we expect some short-term pain as we work through to recalibrate an onshore industry, see tariffs as a necessary motivator to bring companies to the negotiating table. Hold on. To address these deeper issues. I would agree with that. I don't know why my cursor is just not wanting to play ball here. But here we go. Let's go manually. And then he continues and says, considering that the United States often operates with a short-term, quarterly driven economic perspective, while countries like China take a long-term, multi-decade, or even century-based strategic approach, is the current market panic truly reflective of long-term realities, or is it an overreaction to short-term disruptions? And then yeah, so I'll leave it there, and then we'll move to Grant, and then we'll continue. And Adam, I've got a question coming to you on IRS from Jacob, but let's just keep rocking through this. So, Chris, did you see those from Robert?
My quick answer is I just think that the markets are jittery. It's been a stop-start with this administration on tariffs. There's been a pause, there's been a go, there's been a response, and so I do. The markets seem to just be resting on every breath coming out of the White House or coming from somebody. I mean, I believe the market shot up, because there was a potential rumor coming out of the White House about the pause, and then it was deemed that it wasn't true, but then the pause came 2 days later and it shot back up. So, I mean, it is. There's short-term fluctuations in the immediate future right now because of every word coming out of Chairman Powell's mouth, or from the White House, or from other stakeholders in Washington. So, yeah, that's a fair assessment. I think I
So
agree.
I'm going to move to a couple comments from Grant. This is interesting. So he's in the furniture business, and he says, to onshore, we need years, not weeks, to restore. We need massive amounts of capital and can expect lots of automation, dark factories, and lots of AI and robots. The old blue-collar factory work will be replaced by AI, robots, and software engineers. Low-cost labor countries will still be needed where dexterity is needed, for example, in craft industries. Surely we need to hear strategy rather than tagline short-term pain for long-term gain. Are we hearing anything about strategy? I would agree with that.
Agree with that. I mean, he summed it up better than I ever could.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And some of my very fierce right-leaning friends would say the same thing. And he says, "Oh, by the way, there are no tariffs on American furniture in Vietnam. American-made furniture in Vietnam. Interesting." All right, and so Jacob's next. What's happening? This for you, Adam. What's happening with IRS and their ability to service people as will do reviews and audits?
We haven't seen, I've fortunately been blessed with not having had to make a call in a while. But the fact that 25% of the workforce just took the voluntary retirement package is probably not going to be super amazing in terms of customer service and any kind of enforcement. What I will say about that, though, is that, I'm not going to, if I were Elon Musk for a day and I had the opportunity to be Doge for a day, I actually would have gone there first, the IRS, because I feel like that department, I mean, to put this in perspective, the system that processes all of our tax returns, remembering that I had an accounting degree and also a degree in computer information systems. So I was blessed to learn COBOL, common oriented business, which nobody thinks should exist anymore. And yet that's what the tax system still runs on. So if there was anybody who could have gone in, done some data analysis, upgraded the systems as fast as possible, put in as much AI as possible to figure out, well, how, where do we look for trends and correlations and stuff like that? It was that guy. So that's a long way of saying, look, I mean, I firmly believe that 25% of that workforce could have been replaced with automation and AI. And the quality of compliance gotten a lot better. And nobody missed a beat on the whole thing, but they didn't do that second piece. So I think unless they're going to do the second piece, then we're just stuck with crap ass service. And I mean, again, this goes back to short-term pain versus long-term gain. My short-term pain is that, well, look, I freaking hate having to support people when they get audited, because usually it's just a crock of BS that results in a no change audit that was a colossal waste of everybody's time, and no client wants to pay me to represent them. So I end up doing it below cost, because I feel bad for them. So it seems like a colossal waste of time. At the same time, I cannot dispute the fact that for every dollar invested in enforcement, it receives like a $10 or $15 return on recovered tax dollars, but those are with, hey, we're going to go into Walmart and audit them, or we're going to go into this super complicated structure and go audit them and then find some stuff, or we're going to go after people who just didn't claim, stuff, in other words, a good example of a good Doge automation would be, you see, take crypto as an example. Cause you'll see Timmy in the basement on YouTube saying, Gary, we think crypto is a tradable asset. Therefore, you could trade your appreciated crypto for a house and the IRS will never know about that. It's that's not true. That's not the tax code. Not a true statement. Hey, you could just, so basically if I did a little, Doge of, let's just look at Timmy's bank account deposits versus Timmy's reported income. Anybody that's got, A 1,000% variance? Maybe we should check them out. Like that'd be a great example of automation. Like, hey, we found this. We'd like you to offer a letter of explanation to us as why this condition exists. Perchance, there might be some perchance you didn't understand the rules. That'd be a great use of resources, but that's not what we're doing.
So I'm going to follow on because Jacob had one more clarifying question on expectations on future audits.
Lower. I don't see how they can do them. Like, they haven't said, hey, by the way, you can expect to have a reduced audit count from us. It's just math. I mean, there's only so many bodies.
Yeah. And then finally, Jamie, good to see you. So Bolt Group, great industrial design group and graphic design group, and they do a lot of great stuff. Used them for a long time. I was a client of theirs a long time ago. But he says, hey, we're not currently concerned with directly paying tariffs as we're a service organization. However, we're getting hammered because our clients, many of which are manufacturers or have companies having their products produced in Asia, are pausing work, holding on signing SOWs to begin work because of this uncertainty. Got it. Yeah. And that is the ripple effect, that is the ripple effect. So as we're coming down, we got 3 minutes left. Chris, Jack, Adam, any other thoughts? And by the way, Chris, like, I'm serious. This would be really fun. Like, you and one of your colleagues, one of your favorite colleagues that you're going to continue to have a beer with, regardless of the spirited conversation, but to really talk about it from a business impact perspective. That's really all we care about. I don't care about red, blue, right, left. I really care about business impact, and having different perspectives is very important because all three of us that have been doing this for 250 plus weeks have different perspectives. So Robert's like, sign me up. Hey, we could charge. This could be like, like pay-per-view.
Yeah, we could start our own TV show with this. Like, you guys are great, Chris.
It'd be better than the 5, so like, come on.
Yeah. I would love to take Jason and Ryan, my two Republican counterparts, bring them on. I don't care about, being in the minority on 2-on-1. I'm happy to do it. So
no, I think it needs to be one-on-one. You got to pick.
Yeah, let me know which opponent you want, Chris, and I'll go sweet talk them into it.
I don't even think I need to sweet talk them. Especially Jason.
An opportunity to make Chris look stupid. Sign me up.
I don't think they would. I pass up on it, so I'm happy to come back.
Yeah,
and
I only get 1 hour. No, I'm gonna need a lot longer than that. I'm kidding.
Yeah, and if they say no, just tell them Kudlow said that he will do it in case they won't. So okay.
Yeah, actually,
I really need to prepare for that one.
Hey, Chris, if we could, there was one comment that we did miss that I am actually really curious about. Is that I'm still a registered Republican. I lean kind of middle of the road libertarian. And I hate hypocrisy, which is why I'm really struggling with a lot of stuff coming out on both sides right now, but particularly right now. But there is a good question that the Democratic Party is suffering from like a lack of like reasonable. When I say reasonable leadership, there may be very good reasonable leadership happening behind the scenes. We just don't see it. So there just does not appear to be like the reasonable middle of the road voice of the party guy or gal that's out there. Like, if you were to say, well, look, listen to this person or listen to these 2 or 3 people, that seems to be kind of more center left rather than kooky dukes left. Who would you kind of pick? And by the way, my wife said that she'd leave me tomorrow for Cory Booker, so I got to keep him on my.
Oh my gosh. No.
That's a really tough question. That's probably the toughest question I've fielded in the last 60 minutes. and these have been tough questions. The Democratic Party here in Washington is definitely going through a period of change, in my opinion. They're still trying to find themselves. It's You have seen voices come out. Whether or not you think what you think of Senator Booker, he had, I think, 300 million hits on Snapchat. I mean, there were a lot of people who tuned into that historic filibuster. And whether or not you'd agreed with anything he said on that floor or not, um, that is the sort of voice and that is the sort of stuff that I think the Democratic base wants the Democrats here in Washington, D.C. to be doing, given their minority status, given that they aren't part of the discussion. So, you're starting to see some folks step up. I mean, I put two here and people are going to roll their eyes, but AOC is traveling the country. She was in Idaho the other day. Okay. And I'm not saying that suddenly we're going to just AOC is the new leader, but I'm just saying Bernie Sanders, Senator Sanders is out there. You've seen some names that are cropping up. I think you still have to wait and look and see what happens with the governorships. For some of the democratically controlled states, and step up. It's still early. I mean, I joke to people, the election was in November. I mean, it's April. It's mid-April. Okay. And the Dems need to figure it out. They're trying to. I think that there's this part of the party that I don't know if folks saw this, but I think it's David Hogg, who is now he was part of the DNC. He was a part of that shooting that took place at the high school in Florida. He's now a DNC member. They're going to start putting money towards incumbent members who they feel are just not making their voice heard. So I think there's this sort of growing frustration with the younger crop and the base itself about not doing enough. And I think you're going to see some interesting primaries coming up in the midterms. You're going to see some reconciling here. I don't know what voices are going to come out, Adam. I don't have a good answer for you. They're out there, and they're trickling out where they can. But it comes down to messaging, and I think Democrats are still figuring it out. Medicaid seems to be a big issue, and that is the fight. I think you have to watch this reconciliation, watch what's going to happen in the committees in the next 3-4 months as Republicans try to cut out that money to pay for the reconciliation bill and these tax cuts that are coming in. So Democrats are going to try to form some messaging around that. And then you have these tariffs on a parallel path as well. So I don't have a good answer with names. There are folks out there, but I think if you're going to step up, you need to have some good messaging as a part of it, right? I do like the idea of Democrats going to the town halls, and I'll shut up, that Republicans are basically said we're not going to our town halls anymore because we don't want to be shouted down. I like that they're going into those red districts and doing that. But what's the messaging? I think that comes first, and then you've got to get these folks who are going to step up.
Yeah, I kind of, thanks, Robert, for the comment. I would kind of tend to agree with you. And then I want to throw in Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, in the mix too, is kind of, in other words, like, I hear you on the Bernie Sanders thing and the AOC thing in terms of being out there. It's just that provides cannon fodder.
Sure it does. I mean, of course it does. Of course it does. But I think to that point,
yeah.
AOC and Bernie Sanders to most people are like, again, an eye roll. But to the base, they're important, and they're important voices to be heard. And the Dems need the base right now. Donald Trump has done an excellent job of tapping into his base. Democrats, they didn't show up like they needed to in 2019. So clearly they're missing something.
Yeah, you're right.
So it is as much about the tapping into your base with certain folks as it is, center right, center left, independent voters. And Beshear is probably that voice. Governor Shapiro is probably that voice. Potentially Governor Pritzker or whomever, or Governor Whitmer, and so on and so forth. But it'll come around. It's tough. They are in the minority, and there's no real leader right now.
Okay, guys. Well, stay tuned for the pay-per-view. And here's the deal. I think it's going to be a pay-per-view, but for anybody that's been on any of these programs for the last 252 weeks, we're going to waive it. We're going to waive the fee. So, but anybody else, like, we can put it on behind a paywall on YouTube after we're done. So speaking of YouTube, this will be up this afternoon, BGW CPA YouTube channel. It'll be up on the Shumaker YouTube channel. And Chris, good job, man. Thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate it.
And yeah, so I think that the next time, for the first person that gets the right trivia question right, you're going to give the Vote Dukakis hat that's behind you to whomever, right?
It's like hat.
Yeah, I mean,
you got
to hide that, dude.
No, it's a classic. I thought the eye roll would be my Fauci bobblehead here. That's why I put it up. I'm just trying to stoke some of the audience out there. So listen, I just want to say happy Easter, everybody. Safe travels if you're heading out. And thank you so much for this opportunity. I will be back on with probably one of my Republican counterparts. And I appreciate it. And thank you all so much. And thank you for the questions, audience, and everyone. Safe travels.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. It sounds like I owe you guys some drinks at the firm retreat next month. So I'll get you all squared away.
Good job.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Adam.
again. Pleasure. Thank you guys so much. Bye-bye.